If you ever had that burning in your chest after eating or a sour taste that's creeping up your throat, that is reflux. We need stomach acid to be a pH of between about 1 and 3, which is the same as about vinegar or lemon juice. And this is to break our food down. So basically start to unravel our proteins. Think about proteins as like a really tight ball of wool. And what happens is when they go into our stomach, it starts to unravel and then mush all our food up, but it doesn't actually really break it down properly for absorption in the stomach. It's just kind of like prepping it for the small intestine. I see a lot of people go and do gut work and gut healing work, but if they don't have adequate stomach acid production, then you're not really ever going to get on top of your gut issues because you're not addressing like the root cause, which is the low stomach acid is one of the biggest things. Hi, I'm Janet Testaz, holistic nutritionist and emotional healing facilitator. And acid reflux is not always about having too much stomach acid. What's really happening is actually it's not enough. Most of the time it's not making enough stomach acid. So what I want to do for you today is break down what's really going on and what you can do naturally to start to heal your digestion without just masking the symptoms, taking a medication that's going to just fix it short term, but it keeps coming back and keeps getting worse. So acid reflux, what is it? It actually happens when you start to have stomach acid that starts to move up your esophagus and you get that burning feeling. You sometimes might feel really nauseous, or it's a weird sour taste in your mouth, or you bloat. It's the burning, but sometimes a lot of people will get bloating and reflux. They tend to go hand in hand, and you'll understand why in a minute. But there's some of the symptoms, and you can also have a silence reflux where you don't really know that it's happening. It often can happen at night, where you get a bit of a silence reflux where it's coming up here, but it doesn't feel like burning. But then it can cause issues like postnasal drip and needing to clear the throat all the time. So there's a few different ways that it can present. Low stomach acid is one of the big problems. So we need stomach acid to be a pH of between about 1 and 3, which is the same as about vinegar or lemon juice. And this is to break our food down. So basically start to unravel our proteins. Think about proteins as like a really tight ball of wool. And what happens is when they go into our stomach, it starts to unravel and then mush all our food up, but it doesn't actually really break it down properly for absorption in the stomach. It's just kind of like prepping it for the small intestine. It also will activate enzyme production for that breaking down process to happen in the small intestine, and then it will kill off all the bad bugs. So things that are coming in, pathogens and things like that, it should be really acidic so that it kills things off coming in. So when stomach acid is too low, there can be consequences in a few different ways. First of all, the food will sit in your stomach for too long and it can kind of ferment and get really uncomfortable and feel really heavy, and it can produce a gas. And that pressure can also then push upwards back up through your esophagus. We've got a little sphincter, the stomach and the bottom, just to seal it shut. If the stomach acid is low, what happens is because that acidity of the stomach acid and the adequate levels of stomach acid seals it shut, when we don't make enough, it can start to make that little sphincter a little bit looser. And so then acid can come up. This is one of the big underlying causes of reflux. But the other part of this that can really happen is when we eat our food, and if we're not breaking our food down properly, then when it also sometimes goes and sits in our small intestine, and the bacteria in our small intestine will then start to eat the undigested carbohydrate and also produce a gas, and that can often push back up our stomach through both, like the gas pushes back up and then we get the acid also coming up here. So a lot of the time if people are getting bloating and getting reflux, I can see this, and this is what's called SIBO, it's small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And addressing the SIBO can't be addressed without actually increasing the stomach acid and getting the stomach acid right. Because one of the reasons that SIBO has created is two reasons. Either bacteria has come downstream, like when we've eaten food and had drinks, it's come down into our stomach and bacteria hasn't been killed off, and so then it goes and hangs out in the small intestine. It starts to overgrow and reproduce. The bacteria in your stomach, in your small intestine, should be very similar to the ecosystem of, say, a desert, whereas all the bacteria that lives in your large intestine is the ecosystem of a rainforest. I like to compare the two because they're very different, diverse ecosystems. The rainforest is a lot more diverse, a lot more different species, a lot different types. compared to that of an ecosystem of a desert. So you should only have a couple of hundred different types of species of bacteria in your upper GI tract. And then as you go down further into the large intestine, you have a lot more. And so these are very different, but what can also happen is sometimes bacteria can swim upstream and go and hang out, and then when you're not breaking your food down, it has a great party and produces gas, and that gas pushes up. One of the other things that can cause it is also different parasites, and one of those parasites that lives in our stomach is called Helicobacter pylori. H. pylori is the short name for it, and when this pathogen lives in our stomach acid, it can cause stomach ulcers, but it also can lower your stomach acid production. And so if we have that, we will naturally have lower stomach acid production, and then it can be harder to then break our food down, and that SIBO can develop. And so we need to get that tested. Now, that is a breath test. So looking at that is also like ruling that out. If you have that, then you've got to go and address that and treat that before you go on and treat anything else, because this is one of the root causes. I see a lot of people go and do gut work and gut healing work, but if they don't have adequate stomach acid production, then you're not really ever going to get on top of your gut issues, because you're not addressing like the root cause, which is the low stomach acid is one of the biggest things. Also, the pH is very important. Like when we're not as healthy, we're not eating the right foods, we're really stressed, sometimes the pH of our stomach acid will also rise, so it's less acidic and not as effective ability to mush our food up and break it down. That's also important. A few other things that can cause low stomach acid is mineral deficiencies. So there's a few important minerals that we need, and we can't make adequate levels of stomach acid if we don't have these. One of these is zinc. So zinc is important. A lot of people are very low in zinc. There's several reasons for this. And the other two is chloride and sodium. So think about salt. Chloride and sodium are involved in hydrochloric acid. So think about hydrochloride. Sodium is sodium chloride. We actually need that and good levels of sodium as well to make hydrochloric acid in our stomach acid. It's part of the stomach acid. And a lot of people, when they're really stressed, use up sodium. The adrenals like to use sodium. And if we're not getting adequate levels of sodium into our body, then we're not going to be able to make good levels of hydrochloric acid. Potassium is one of the other things. So we need potassium to help the acid secreting cells produce the acid. And if people are very low in potassium, which is also based on stress, potassium also helps you with your vitality. This is going to be very hard. Like, you're going to be pushing shit uphill because you don't have the raw ingredients to create the recipe, to bake the cake. Other mineral deficiencies like B vitamins, like your B1 and your B6 and your B3, help the acid production process. And so it's a bit of a catch-22, because it's often like we don't have enough stomach acid to absorb our food, but we also need the nutrients to be able to make enough stomach acid. So which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? The other things that can really impact it is stress. So when we're stressed, blood flow will move away from our digestive tract and move to our limbs. We go into fight or flight mode, and our digestion shuts down. So we have less acid, poor motility, so it's not going to move as well. A lot of that reason is because that vagus nerve, we've got this nerve that goes from our brain to all our organs. This needs to be firing correctly. And when we're stressed and in that fight or flight state, we're in sympathetic. So our sympathetic nervous is switched on, digestion is not a priority, and this vagal nerve and the tone of that vagus nerve is not firing correctly, and it makes digestion really hard. So learning how to deal with your stress and your emotional triggers, how to regulate yourself so you start to feel safe in your body. And a lot of the time when I'm talking about stress, it's how we respond to the day-to-day things in our life. And that's the difference between how one person can be really resilient and other person, it can tip them over the edge. And a lot of that is to do with their past wounding, the way that they know how to connect to themselves. And ultimately what we're talking about is creating safety in the body. And when people don't feel safe in the body, what happens is they've got this background alarm going. It's in the background, it's in the unconscious, but essentially it's like I'm always kind of on edge. I'm always on alert. And if this is my normal way of operating, there's going to be naturally higher levels of cortisol, and our reaction to the things, our externals, is a lot more reactive because we're in that state of alarm. And this could be you, where you're people walk into the room and you jump and you're highly reactive, or things really trigger you, or you just don't have that capacity or the resilience to cope. They're all signs of overactive and activated nervous system. And one of the big things I do with the work I do with people is teaching them how to regulate their nervous system and how to create safety ultimately in the body. So low vagal tone from the nervous system and having a dysregulated nervous system is really big. It's really key to working on your digestive tract. I also see a lot of people emotionally hold on to a lot of stuff in their digestive, in their tummies, in their bellies when they're feeling stressed. It's never just one thing. It's never just like, oh yes, it's this. It's always a combo of looking at the whole person and treating them. Some of the other common triggers for reflux is overeating, eating too late, eating the wrong foods that can trigger the reflux. So things like caffeine, too much alcohol, spicy foods and fatty foods will set people off because their digestion's sluggish and they're not breaking their food down. Tight clothing even, smoking, pregnancy, other medications. So medications like antacids, PPIs, calcium channel blockers. PPIs are designed to decrease stomach acid production, and they're often used if people have, say, things like ulcers, which might be triggered from Helicobacter pylori. But that is often people go, I've got reflux, and they'll put someone on PPI and then leave them on there, which causes a whole range of issues. And they're not meant to be on it long term. That medication says on the info when you look at PPIs, and you can look it up online, it's not to be prescribed long term. I have seen people on PPIs for like years and years, and then getting off it can be really challenging because you can't just go cold turkey. So symptoms of reflux, besides that burning, sometimes you can also feel chest pain, you can feel really full, you can have extra saliva, you can have a scratchy throat. You can often have bloating, whether it's directly after a meal or later on. And like I said before, you'll usually get a combination of different symptoms. So ways that you can support your stomach acid. It's like, okay, if I realize I've got reflux, it probably means I've got low stomach acid and poor absorption. So what do I do? Okay, so the first thing is getting some apple cider vinegar or some digestive bitters to increase your stomach acid before you eat. So you can even do it with half a lemon. I like to tell my clients to do half a squeezed lemon in warm water and a pinch of Celtic sea salt in the morning to get their digestion going. And then before they eat, to have a cupful of apple cider vinegar, the raw stuff with the mother, and some warm water, maybe 15-20 minutes before they eat. Not always possible, but always good to be able to try and incorporate that into your day. The other thing is start to use some digestive enzymes. So digestive enzymes that have enzymes in them, as well as things like a herb called gentian or some other components like betaine hydrochloride to naturally increase your stomach acid so you can start to break your food down properly. Stomach acid increases. You've also then got enzymes in there to help you break your food down when it goes into your small intestine. And that combo of things can make the symptoms really ease up quite quickly if you're taking the right type of enzymes. You've got to be taking the right amount as well. You can also do some really nice, like a Berogast, herbal supports that have got things that are soothing afterwards if you're feeling really bloated or heavy. Also looking at the inflammation in your gut. So that comes with, okay, we've got to restore the gut balance, start to change the diet. I always tell people to get off gluten and get off dairy and really, really, really cut dramatically back on any sugars that they've got in their diet. Ideally cut all sugars out, particularly processed sugars. Looking at the type of food you're eating, but gluten for me is the number one. I usually, if they've got bloating, you've got to look at gluten as the first thing, and then there's other things outside of that. Some people are very sensitive to different sugars, particularly if they've got SIBO, which is that bacterial overgrowth in the gut. They then have to actually go on a protocol to actually kind of reduce that. But that's the first thing, is starting to restore the gut. And the other thing is then looking at your nutritional deficiencies. So testing, which is maybe probably actually the first thing I would do, is we need to look at, okay, what deficiencies have you got in your system? The way that I do it is that for the most part with minerals, I don't test with blood. I test with hair tissue testing because there's a lot of things that you can't test in the blood accurately. They need to be tested in the tissue. When the hair tissue comes back, I can tell things that you can't see in blood, like calcium and sodium and potassium. They're in the blood, but they're used there to balance and create equilibrium in the blood. So you can't see what's in the tissue, and it's a very different story. So using that as a resource is really powerful. Changing the diet, reducing your alcohol and caffeine intake, actually, as you go through and heal your gut, figuring out what foods trigger you and learning how to regulate nervous system. Just a little note on medications. If you're on PPIs, antacids, please don't suddenly stop, particularly if your reflux is really bad. They can make it way worse. It needs to be done with a practitioner. It needs to be done slowly, particularly if you've been on them long term. So please, please, please don't do that. And the other thing is, it's really important to make sure that you come in underneath, you create all the foundations right, and this applies to coming off any medication, which you will do in conjunction with your talking to your doctor. But go, okay, can I create the foundations, make sure everything's good, all my tank's full, I've made all the changes, I'm reducing all the inflammation in my body, I'm absorbing my food better, and then start to, like, there's going to be a dance to come off medication. PPIs is not any different. It's they're protein pump inhibitors. They're designed to lower stomach acid, but we've got to do a dance so you start to absorb your food properly to get to the root of the problem. So if you have gotten all the way to the end, I'm assuming that you've got reflux or you know someone that's got reflux, and this is your body's way of telling you that something is off. So masking it doesn't get to the root cause. And so you're going to keep getting problems, and you'll get further health problems if you don't address this underlying issue. So it's really important to get on top of this. If this was addressed when people started to get this issue, rather than putting them on medication and then 10, 20 years later having all sorts of other health issues, this would actually really address a lot of the root cause with a lot of much more complex lifestyle health issues. So if this resonates, what I said is, if there's something in you that's gone, oh my gosh, I haven't heard this info before, or, it's resonating, both components of what I'm talking about with the biochemistry as well as the emotional, because I don't just do one. Let's have a conversation. There's a link below. You can book in a free 20-minute health assessment with me, and that's just a conversation around what's going on for you so we can figure out where are you at, where do you want to go, and if we'd be the right fit, give you some insights. And usually on that call, I say to people, well, let's have a conversation about this, what this looks like, and, I can explain how I work, but it's really like, if I don't feel like I'm going to be the right person for you, I don't take people on. I usually then just say, well, I'll point you in the right direction. So if that resonates, book in with me. I'd love to have a conversation with you, and I will see you in the next video. See ya.